Hey there, welcome to today's video where we're going to focus in on how to recognize and describe graphs when we see the slope is either positive, negative, or zero. So I wanted to remind you guys that in our previous video we talked about how to graph these lines based on the equation. And at the end of the video we actually just kind of reviewed that if it's in this general direction it's positive, if it's in this general direction it's negative, and if it's a flat line it's going to have no slope. And you guys already watched a video too on why we can't divide by zero. So in a little bit, we're actually going to be talking about the undefined graph. But first, let's just review the three that should be familiar. So the first thing I want to point out is just the positive graphs. The reason that these lines are positive is because that the staircase in the background goes up and then over. And anytime you have a positive divided by a positive, that's a positive answer. So you can see the first point that I have here is 0, 2, and it's plotted there, and then 2, 6 is the point here if you go over 2 and up 6. So either the line or the table of values shows us the slope here. At this point, we've seen slope as an M. We've talked about the staircase as a rise over run, and we've talked about in the table of values how the Y values change and then the X values change. So for example, here I see that this goes up by 3. While this has gone over by 2. So the Y values should go up by 3, and then the X should go over by positive 2. And you can see here the staircase, if you go up 3 and then over 2, that's the slope. So in the first one here, we have a positive slope. M here would be 3/2. And if we were to write the equation, we can see here that it crosses at a plus 3. So we could write Y equals 3/2x plus 3. And let me go ahead and put the Y equals now. And that would be the equation for the first graph. And again, we can see here now the coefficient is a positive. The rise over run staircase is positive, positive. And in the table of values, it's also a positive over a positive. One other quick thing before I move on, I just wanted to show that if you moved down and then back, by going down and then back, a negative divided by a negative is also still positive. So that would work here for the positive line. Now for the second one here, for the negative, again, it's going kind of backwards. Some of you kind of see this over here to the left, and then some of you also kind of see that this moves down. So it doesn't matter how you really think of it, either pointing to the left or kind of pointing downward, while this one kind of looked up and then went to the right. So for our negative graphs here, let's just kind of look at the ordered pairs. This ordered pair is back 1, up 4, while this ordered pair over here is over 4, up 1. So I'm just picking 2 points from the line. And over here on the Y's, I can actually see that from 4 to 1, this went down by 3. And then over here, -1 to 4, we're actually going up by 5. So the Y, on the Y-axis, we should see a down 3, 1, 2, 3. And then on the X-axis, we should see to the right 5. And there it is. So the slope for this one is a -3 over 5. And I'm not going to worry about the equation for this one just because the line, it kind of looks like it crosses not perfectly, so it would be a decimal, and that can happen, but I'm just going to let the algebra teachers talk to you about how to format that as a decimal later on. But for this review video, all I care about is that you can see this line and tell me that the slope here would be a -3/5. And again, even from the table of values, the Y's, again, we see the change in Y. Right here, the numerator is a change in Y, the -3, and then the change in X, it went over by 5. Friendly reminder that you could technically go up by 3 and then back 5. And if you go up 3 and then back 5, that's still a positive divided by a negative, which is a negative overall. So this is what it looks like when you have a negative slope. And already the other thing that you have learned about is if you have a 0 slope, which again, these lines are flat, they have no steepness. So the red point here is the y-intercept, and we know that would cross at a +5. So we know that the ordered pair 0, 5 is also on the line. And the green point, if you go back 3 and up 5, that's the green point. And the yellow point is over 3, up 5. So look what happens in the table of values. There is no change here. There is no change. The numerator is going to be a 0. And then if we look at the x-axis, the change in x, this goes up by 3. Oh, sorry, yeah, this is actually a plus. Actually, let me switch the order of this. Sorry, you can see here, I want to put this 0, 5 in the middle. Let me just switch this out real quick. If I do that, it doesn't change that this was a 0. There's no change here. And now it just goes in order from the green to the red to the yellow. So green and then red and then yellow. And now we can see that this is a +3 and then a +3. So this slope here, the change in y's was a 0. And then this went over 3 and then over 3. And 0 divided by any number is just 0. And so that's going to be a flat line right there. Now I did want to review with you guys that this equation here is going to be y equals 3, because if it has no slope, it technically starts out as a 0x. Then we see that it crosses at a +3. And 0 times x is just 0, and 0 plus 3 is 3. So this flat line has the equation y equals just a number, and it's y equals 3. So anytime you see y equals just a number, it is a flat line with a 0 slope. And last but not least here, I want to talk about these undefined lines. I had you guys watch a video why you cannot divide by 0. We know that 0 can be divided by anything, that can happen, but you cannot divide by 0. And let's look what happens over here, okay? So when I'm at this point, to get to the next point, I would have to rise 1, 2, 3, 4. So I rise 4. That's the top part of my staircase. But then there is no run. So if I look at that point, I would go up 4, and then I don't go anywhere on the x-axis. So right there, that's me trying to divide by 0, and that cannot happen. So this whole go up and then over on the x-axis, if you don't go over and there is no change on the x-axis, which is a 0, since we can't divide by 0, here we would say that m is undefined. So anytime I ask for the slope of one of these vertical up-down lines, anytime I ask for the slope, you would just honestly tell me it's undefined. Now, if the y equals a number is a flat line, and it goes through 3 here, let's take a look at these vertical lines. Look at the table of values. Do you guys notice that every single time here, x equals a -5? So what I'm going to do is just show you guys here that that's the equation of the line, and it's because it crosses through right here at -5, and no matter which point we look at, the x value is a -5. So the equation for these lines actually start with x equals, and then it just tells you where it goes through. So this one goes through a -5. So anytime you see x equals just a number, it's the weird thing, okay? It's weird. It's the undefined slope. It goes straight up and down. It's the one that starts with an x equals. Everything else starts with y equals, and we've had y equals mx plus b format. So for the positives and the negatives, you'll definitely see, like positive, you'll see y equals positive mx and then plus or minus b. For the negative, you would see y equals, and then you'd have a negative coefficient, and then you'd have your constant. And then for 0, you'll just see y equals straight up whatever number is over here where it crosses, so y equals b. And then for the very last one here, you'll see x equals just the number. And whatever that number is, whatever you see there, it's the vertical line, and it tells you where it's going to cross. So again, this is kind of like your positive format. This would be a negative format. This would be a horizontal flat line, and this would be the vertical up-down undefined lines. And I'll highlight now just so it kind of stands out. There would be the positive coefficient, the negative coefficient, y equals straight up just a number, so it's flat. And then green here over here is x equals just a number, and that's straight up and down. All right? So that takes care of how to recognize the positive, negative, 0, or undefined from the lines. Let's take a look here. If you just see the equation, let's just review how to find slope and y-intercept, and then just tell me if it's a positive or a negative slope, okay? So in this equation right here, y equals 4x plus 2, this line is going to have a positive slope because the coefficient is a 4/1, so that's going to be positive. And I'm just going to write POS for positive. You can spell it all out. I'm just going to shorthand it here. Now the next one, technically, remember, I'm going to write it here in red so it stands out. Anytime you don't see a number, that's going to have a positive coefficient of up 1/1. So once again, positive. And real quick, I just want to mention that this line would cross at 0, 2, and this line would cross below the origin at 0, negative 3. So off to the side here in blue, I can actually just briefly sketch these lines just to make sure you guys are okay with how they would look on the coordinate plane. Again, this is just a brief sketch. So the first one, I'd start up here at +2, and then I'd go up 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1, and then up 4 more over 1. I could go down 4 and back 1. And let me just get my line here. So that's a rough sketch of 4x plus 2. And can't forget my little arrows on the end. So that's a rough sketch of that one. And then a rough sketch of x minus 3. So this one's going to cross down here at 1, 2, 3. And because we have a slope of 1 over 1, we're going to go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up and over. And we could go down and back, down and back. And let me just connect here. So this is a rough sketch of y equals x minus 3, x minus 3. You can see here this line's much steeper because the coefficient 4 is greater than the coefficient over here of 1. Since 4 is bigger than 1, this line is steeper. All right, now let's take a look at this next one. So this next one, we actually have a negative coefficient. So this one's going to have a negative slope. And if we sketch this one, it's going to cross at +1 over here. And I would go up 2, back 1, up 2, back 1. Or you can go down 1, 2, over 1, down 2, over 1. And this is a rough sketch. You can see this line's actually going backwards, which makes sense because we had a negative coefficient. Friendly reminder, when you guys see that, again, my two movements, if you go up and then back, if you go up 2 and then back 1, that's still the same as going down 2 and then over 1. Now here, for this next example, we see x equals just a number. I kind of want this one to stand out to y'all because it's the one that has x only. It's x equals a number. So there is no coefficient here. There is no coefficient, and NA stands for not applicable. So anytime you don't have something or it's not applicable, you just put an NA. So then here, the type of slope is undefined. And I'm going to write that one out just because that's the new word for today, undefined. And in red, we'll graph it over here so it stands out. If x equals 6, that'd be over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on this line. And it would just be a straight up and down line through x equals 6. That's the vertical up, down, undefined line, x equals 6 right here. All right. We're almost done. We've got this next one has a slope of a negative 1/3. And so that's negative. Coefficient's negative 1/3. So that's going to be, we're going to go up 1, back 3, up 1, back 3 for that one. So for here, let's see this one. Okay, this one starts at +5. So up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, I can go up 1 and then back 1, 2, 3. Up 1, back 3. Or you could go down 1 and then over 3, down and then over 3. Starting to get a little crowded over here, but that's okay. I think you guys get the idea. So again, that's the +5 and then up 1, back 3. All right, cool. So now we have y equals 6x, and you guys might remember here, if you don't see a plus or a minus number, that's the type that's going to go through the origin. So this graph is actually just going to start at the origin, and then we just go up 6 over 1, up 6 over 1. So this one's going to be a positive slope. And again, from the origin, you can kind of see here, I just only need quadrant 1 for this one. So it's going to start at the origin because of the +0 that we don't technically see right here, and then we just go up 6 over 1. Then you go up 6 more and then over 1. And that one's going to be a very steep line. It's actually the steepest one we've seen so far. 6 is by far the greatest number we've seen here in this chart. So that's definitely the steepest line. And I want to remind you guys, anytime you see y equals just a number, that's the one that there is no slope. It's flat. This is the flat line. And so here you would just put that the slope is 0. And if we were to sketch this one again, let me just sketch a coordinate plane real quick. This is just my x and y axis. And this one says y equals 4, so we'd come up here to 1, 2, 3, 4, and it'd be a flat line through 4. That's y equals 4. So in this graph, or in this chart, I should say, let's just highlight real quick. This one should really stand out. That's the vertical up-down line with an undefined slope. And then this is the flat line that has a slope of 0. Technically, the coefficient is 0. I don't want you guys to forget about that. I had that written up here. When you see like 0 times a number, it cancels out, and then you just see the number. So that's why that's a 0. And then it would just cross there at 4. All right, now we're down here at the bottom of this page, and I've got the first one typed in here so that you guys can see what we're going to try to do for these next ones. So first, let's just take a look at graph A, and we're just going to kind of describe graph A. Over here, you can see that it's the flat line, and it crosses right there through the ordered pair 0, 2. So that's what I have in here. It's flat, which means it has no steepness. We can also say that that's horizontal. That's another word for flat. We know that the slope here, m, would be 0 because it has no steepness. And I just want to reiterate, if I wanted to go from this orange point to this green point, I would not go up or down any, and I would just run 4. So that's, again, 0 divided by anything is 0. And then we can see where it crosses. So I actually can come up with the equation for this thing. Since it has no slope, it's y equals just a number, and it crosses at 2. So this one would be y equals 2. All right, now let's move on to line B. All right, so for line B, let's see some things that we have here. So for line B, when I'm looking over here, the first thing I notice is that it's definitely got a positive slope. I see that it actually crosses. The next thing I notice is that it crosses at 0, -2. And then let's go in here and actually plot in some points to see if we can actually see what that slope is. We know that this is a point. And I feel like I see that this is a point, and then same thing here. So to go from point to point, we basically just go up 1 over 3, up 1 over 3. So that's the next thing that I see over here, is that our slope would be a 1/3. So now if I put all these things together, I can actually write the equation of the line. So it's positive, and it's going to be y equals the 1/3 x. And then since it crossed at a negative -2, we're going to put -2. So we can describe its slope, we can describe where it crosses, and we can even write the equation. And now for the last one, let's erase this. Let's take a look at just line C. All right, so for line C, right here, first thing I'm going to notice is that it's negative. So let me go ahead and put that in here. All right, the next thing I notice is that it crosses. For me, it's easier to recognize where it crosses. It crosses at 0, 4, and now let me look at the slope. So let's go in here and look at some points. So I feel like this is a point, here's another point, and so on. So let's see, we would basically have to go down 1, 2, and then over 1. Let's make sure I got that right. We're going to go down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. So that's the staircase. And so that would be the down 2 over 1. All right, so let's put all that together and write the equation of this line. So y equals, and then it'd be a -2x. We don't have to put the 1, because anytime something's over 1, you don't have to write it. And then it crosses above, so we'll put +4. And we were able to describe all of these lines. And just for fun, just to make sure you guys are okay, let me actually put in another line here in green. And let's put it right here. All right, cool. And let's just make sure, if you saw that green line, first thing you catch is that it's up and down, which means it's going to be undefined. And it's the one that's going to start with x equals. So if its slope is undefined, it starts with x equals, and since it crosses through at a 1, that would be the equation of that green line there, x equals 1. All right, now let's flip over and just kind of practice and see how we're doing with this stuff. So if we have graphs 1, 2, and 3 here, we're going to answer a series of these questions, and we're going to identify here just graphs 1, 2, and 3. So the first thing we want to know is which of these graphs shows us a positive slope. So for graph 1, our line is down here. For graph 2, the line is right here. And for graph 3, the line is right there. So which one of these has a positive slope? Boom, boom, or boom. I think you guys would agree. Definitely graph 2. All right, now which of these shows an undefined slope? Remember, undefined is when it's straight up and down, and that's the weird one with the x equals a number. So that's going to be graph 3. And which one shows a 0 slope? So 0 is the flat line, which is right here, and that's going to be the first graph. All right, now let's just look at the equations then. So the next one we care about is which is graph x equals -1. So if it's x equals a number, that's the undefined one. And you can see if this is the origin, it crosses right here at -1. So this is graph 3. All right, now we're looking for something that has a positive slope and crosses below the origin. This graph right here crosses below the origin, and there's the up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1 that you don't see written right here. And I know that's slightly off right there, and that's definitely my bad that the line is slightly off, but that's what I was going for this one. So this is graph 2. And then when it's simply y equals a number, that's again going to be the flat line, and it crosses right here through -4. So that's going to be graph 1. All right. Now, if you want to try this next part on your own and just pause the video and then check, feel free. So if you want to pause the video, go ahead, but I'm going to go through it now. All right, so which is y equals 2x? So it's positive, and then the slope is up 2 over 1. And I know that it would actually cross through the origin. So I got to look for something that crosses through the origin and has a positive slope. And that's going to be right here. It crosses through the origin, and we go up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. So this one's graph 1. All right, what is the slope of the graph in number 2? So I just want to know the slope of the graph in number 2. Now the thing that kind of stinks when you look at this is that there's no points, so we got to kind of label them, and I like to call them pretty points. For example, the y-intercept here is actually not a pretty point. A pretty point to me is one that crosses right there at the intersection of the gridded background. So here's a point. I see another one right here, and it looks like I have another one right here. So let's count the staircase here. I would have to go up 2, back 3, up 2, back 3. So up 2, back 3. Now I want to point out that you could also go from here to here and say, okay, well, what if I went down 2 over 3, down 2 over 3? Either way, it's a -2/3. M here, I'm just going to put the negative out front of my fraction. So M here would be a -2/3 for the second graph. And for the last one, since it is a flat line, we know that the slope is 0. M here is 0. And if I took it a step further, I could tell you that the equation of the line is y equals just a number. And here it would be y equals 2 because it passes through 2. So the goal of this video is to make sure that you guys could tell me anything and everything about lines if they're positive, negative, or flat. And I wanted to introduce the concept of the undefined vertical line. And that concludes this video. Thank you.